guys, I am bringing you a review today that I kind of read last minute because up until this point, at least since I was aware of it, I have been quietly participating in the boycott of St. Martin's Press and these affiliates. There was a whole situation there that I'm not going to spend time recapping because other people have done it much better than me, but they finally, after months and months and months, released a statement responding to the boycott, which I will link below if you're interested in seeing their response. It's been a whole thing, and I have therefore, ever since I heard about it, not been promoting books because it was a promotion boycott. So this was a book that I wasn't sure I was going to be able to review for you guys, even though I had requested it because it is from St. Martin's Press. But I was really excited about the concept and the idea. It felt like hilariously personal for this channel. And so since the promotional boycott has ended, I am able to bring you my ARC review of Andy Burke's novel, Fall for Him. Now, this is an ARC review, but if you see this review the day it comes out, it's not out quite yet, but it should be out in the next couple of days. So you will be able to request it from your local library or your local bookstore, whoever you get your books. While I was really excited about this one, it had like one major issue that like kind of threw off the entire book for me, and then had other things that spiraled out from there. And this is another book along my like weird streak of this lately, which is just like very grief focused. There are a lot of grief focused romance novels out there, and I certainly did not really expect that from this one when I requested it. So Fall for Him is the love story between Derek and Dylan. Derek and Dylan live in the same kind of apartment building. And ever since Dylan moved in to help do some repair work for his uncle, his uncle actually owns the apartment. Dylan has moved in temporarily to help with some repair work in the apartment. Derek has hated Dylan, and Dylan has no idea why. Dylan is a very quiet person. He has ADHD that he has only recently gotten good meds for and is still like kind of figuring his way through his diagnosis. He is a general contractor, a rock climber, and a super smart coder who owns his own business and makes a lot of money. The people in this novel have a lot of talents. This book turns out to be very connected to another book by Andy Burke that I have not read, that was the love story between Derek's best friend Olive, or Olivia, and her girlfriend Stella. This is intimately connected to this book, and maybe I would have understood it better had there been any indication whatsoever that these books were connected. There wasn't. Because Derek hates Dylan. Because Dylan once had a very disastrous date with Olive's brother and Derek's former best friend and super crush, Jake. Now, Derek has only ever heard Jake's side of this, but Jake has, within the last couple of years, passed away from an accident. There's a lot of unresolved feelings and grief here because Derek and Jake were never able to really figure it out. They had hooked up a couple of times, but like Derek was basically in love with Jake for his entire life, and now he's gone. Derek is a ER nurse. He also used to be a professional hairdresser. He lifts weights, and he has an adorable wolf of a dog named Gus, who he kind of inherited / is looking after for Olive while Olive and Stella travel. But Gus was Jake's dog, so there's a lot of emotions even wrapped up in the dog. Is there a lot going on yet? Because I haven't even started talking about the actual plot of this. There's a lot. Okay. So, hatred. They don't like each other. This becomes a massive problem because, again, Dylan with his ADHD, he's making some sous vide food. He turns the water on in his kitchen and forgets to turn it off. The kitchen kind of floods, and it exacerbates a breaking joist in the floor between Dylan's apartment and Derek's apartment. And Dylan literally falls through when the floor collapses and ends up in bed with Derek and Gus and a lot of building material. Both of them, for various reasons, do not want to alert the HOA that is like run by someone. Her name is Carol, but they call her Parakeet Karen because she keeps birds. And Gus isn't supposed to be there. Dylan has been doing stuff he's not supposed to do. So Dylan, because he's a general contractor as well as a coder, as well as a rock climber, is just like, I will fix this for free. Please don't say anything, Derek. And you know, they have to live together while the repairs are being done. Now, for those of you who don't know, when Michaela and I were living together, we actually had this happen. It wasn't our fault. One of the pipes in between our like first floor ceiling and second floor burst when there were contractors doing work in there, and we came home to the ceiling being on the floor, and it was like a very traumatic moment. So when I saw the like plot of this, right, just in the little synopsis, I was like, this is hilarious and I have to read it. It also sounded wonderful with the enemies to lovers stuff, but of course some of the stuff that I told you, like how like everyone has these really crazy and wild talents and like there's a lot of grief stuff, I didn't know until I got into it. The book does have an author's note where the author Andy Burke talks about how grief was a really big part of writing this novel. So I will say that there was like this in-between stage, right, from when I started reading it to like reading the author's note at the beginning and realizing that that was going to be a part of it. I just kind of accepted that into my life. There's been a lot of grief romance novels lately, and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna let this go, and this sounds really cute, so I'm just gonna read it. So obviously one of the major things was like the characters seem really wild, right? Because it's like, you know, Dylan is this master contractor and a coder and a rock climber. And then like when Dylan needs a haircut at one point, you are revealed to you that Derek, besides being an extremely competent ER nurse, is also a licensed hairdresser. So like things like that happen throughout the novel that just kind of make this feel a little ridiculous. Again, this is a romance novel, so it is what it is. But you would think with these kind of wild character like traits and identities that Dylan and Derek, because this is a double POV novel, would feel different. Outside of having similar names, the character chapters read so similarly, even though on paper Derek and Dylan should be two very different personalities, that at times it was impossible to remember who was like who narrating the chapter. It honestly felt sometimes like in between the chapters because they weren't labeled. You would kind of have to guess whose POV chapter it was, and then it would be like a little bit wishy-washy sometimes in the middle. This bothered me throughout the entire reading experience because I really just felt a little bit confused and lost in a bunch of chapters where I really wasn't sure whose internal monologue I was getting at the time. Part of it's probably about how fast I read, right? So Derek, Dylan, as I'm reading very quickly, you know, maybe it was partially my fault because I didn't really differentiate too well between the names, but like their personalities, like again, Derek being like this macho, Dylan at one point calls him a himbo, like who like works out at the gym and is an ER nurse and is very outgoing and gregarious, and Dylan who has a lot of internalized like anxiety about himself and is very nerdy and just like introverted, is how they're initially portrayed. Although, like I said, throughout the novel, the characters just kind of become whatever the situation needs them to be. So yeah, the characterization throughout this novel is just like, it's a big problem and it undercuts everything else that is going on in this novel. So like I said, there is a lot of grief and like anxiety and sadness and insecurity in this novel. Starting with Dylan, he is kind of the runt of his family. He has a big Irish Catholic family. He has 3 or 4 older brothers, and they are like these big strapping straight guys, and in this very Irish Catholic family, he has often been picked on for his size, and not necessarily outright his gayness, but there is discussion of like internalized homophobia and all that kind of stuff from his family. So there is this whole storyline with him being very insecure about himself and also having to like learn to stand up for himself with his family. And then Derek, of course, is still struggling with the grief over losing Jake, as well as some really crazy family dynamics for him as well. His father died when he was 16 of cancer, and at that time his dad had asked him to take care of the family, and that has really wrecked Derek's relationship with one of his sisters, and so he's like also trying to figure out his own stuff. There is so much going on in this book, and that's why, you know, in the chapters where I'm just like, who is narrating, who is talking, who is thinking these things, like outside of their relationship, it just felt so confusing. And it was really hard to remember like who's who and what's what, and that's part of why I said like there is another book that comes before this that would have at least explained the dynamics on Derek's side of the equation, so maybe some of that would have landed differently had I known that. But again, I don't know what, like, you can write standalone novels, y'all, but if they are connected to other novels you have written, there has to be something somewhere to tell people that they are connected, because oh my goodness. It feels weird to say that their romance took a back seat in this book, considering that they are constantly in close contact, basically, after the ceiling falls through. And a lot of the grief storyline, the insecurity storyline, it's a really, really big part of their relationship, and miscommunication and like things where they feel like they are being heard, or some things that are like hidden from each other a little bit. But at the same time, it just felt like everything else completely overwhelmed the romance. So it was really hard. And like for a lot of it, because it is a dual POV, you know some things that haven't been told to the other person, and you know that that is going to be a problem for the other person. So there's that withholding information trope that I really dislike, where I was just like, you could have just said it. This didn't have to be the big deal that it is about to be. And so that then casts a shadow on some of their more romantic scenes, which are really cute. In particular, there's a lot of them texting back and forth in the novel, and for whatever reason, they have more personality when they text than when they actually talk to each other somehow. Don't ask me, but it's really cute when it gets there. It just, like I said, this novel is so chock full of really, really dark, deep, heavy topics that it can just be like the romance is like, you know, trying so hard to claw out from like between the cracks of that, and it just feels overwhelmed. I want a happy romance novel. I want a silly romance novel. I want one that makes absolutely no sense, but no one has recently lost a loved one, or is dealing with grief, or is dealing with a deadly illness. Like, I don't know what's going on, like why this is a trend that I have specifically caught in the arcs that I've requested or what, but I'm really, really tired by it. It is not why I read this genre, and while some of these, like, I think I really could have liked if they were in between some other stuff. Especially reading them all back to back to back is like, okay, all right, I'm done. So I am going to try to be more aware of things like storygraph tags moving forward, and maybe just not reading arcs if I see something that just looks like I'm not gonna like it. But again, I think this one had a lot of potential, but like I said, the writing style where I just couldn't figure out who was talking and when, and other characterization issues just kind of made the whole novel really hard to read for me. So you can make your own decision, like I said, pretty soon, within the next couple of days when this book does come out. So you don't have to take my word for it. You can test out the writing for yourself. These are but my own opinions, and you can form your own soon. I'm just happy I got this book read on time. Thanks, guys. Bye.